I'm here with Ivie Correa of Black Lives Matters Grassroots, Hartford, and the Cheshire Hunger Strike. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I saw you at the Black Lives Matter media event virtually, and I reached out afterwards, and I thought that you would be like a great guest to have. Could you just share a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to become involved with Black Lives Matter Grassroots Hartford and activism in general?
So, all the founding members of we call ourselves BLM 860 because if you're from Hartford, you're from the 860. And we all came together during the George Floyd protests, and we all came to support a rally. And when we showed up, the organizer recognized us from our parents. We didn't know who he was. And then he said, "Oh, you guys know what you're doing. Um, you go ahead and take over." So we took our megaphones and we led everyone. And, we've always wanted to get into advocacy. We've always been very outspoken. And we found out the following day after blocking the bridge that all our parents had previously rallied together and they knew each other.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so very small world because we had no idea that, we were basically second generation and that it was our parents that came before us. So I guess they stopped when we were very young and became more politically involved.
That's really incredible. Do you feel like, your parents instilled, the importance of activism in you, like when you were growing up?
My grandmother did. So, my grandmother was a union organizer and she was always very involved. My parents, during my youth, they were always busy working. So, I think it was more my grandmother who had a very big impact. And I guess it would be the same kind of for them. They don't remember their mother doing advocacy. I don't remember my parents doing much advocacy, more political work. But it's just one of those things. We always had the passion for it. We tried to organize protests and rallies before, years prior, and no one really wanted to get involved. It was like there was really nothing going on, and in 2020, everything kind of changed, and people were more outspoken. And we were able to get in touch with existing activist circles, and we've done our best to seek out new advocates, go to college campuses like, hey, I see that you guys have this group, let's work together. um it's very easy just to do your own work by yourself, but it's so much easier if you become part of a community and usher people in and bring them together.
Most definitely. I think like community is so important. What would you say are the key goals and priorities of Black Lives Matters Grassroots Hartford at this moment?
So right now we've been working for years not on reform but abolishment with the police. um when we first formed, the police departments asked to meet with us, elected officials asked to meet with us. There was a little bit of a tour. This is when the police accountability bill in Connecticut was being debated, the body cameras, and eventually that law was passed. Shout out to the ACLU here in Connecticut. The ACLU was very instrumental in that, along with other organizations. It was a very big group effort. And what we worked on next was cannabis reform. So we were able to band together with so many other organizations working on cannabis reform. And we actually ended up getting arrested on the lawn of the Speaker of the House. And they passed the bill with emergency certification about a month later, the day before our court dates. So right now we're working on still the abolishment of police, especially the abolishment of qualified immunity. Unfortunately, people are still dying at the hands of police here in Connecticut. You would think Connecticut's a really blue state, and it's not.
Yeah. Uh,
um, we find our main opponents are actually Democrats themselves, um, as well as equity in cannabis. Right now, the FBI is actually investigating our licensing practices because we don't have equity in cannabis at all. And there's still people who are serving time for possession despite the pardons that were issued. Something else that we've been working on as well is equity in our educational system. So, despite quote unquote having the second best schools in the country, we have one of the biggest inequities, racial inequities, in our very, very segregated state. So, Connecticut gets way too much credit for being a blue state and not having Jim Crow, but you don't need your own water fountain when you had your own zip code.
For sure. I definitely have experienced that. I've had some really racist incidents in Connecticut, like particularly one that comes to mind. I was at the Merritt Parkway and I be getting arrested, like, at the subway because of like, just a simple, like, conversation, like, about like, my order. And like, like I ended up getting charged and like, going to jail and like having to like, bail out and like, eventually getting the charge, like, it was a misdemeanor just pleading out because like I'm not going to continue. I don't live in Connecticut. I was living in Massachusetts at the time, and which I feel like, some of the laws there are even egregious. Like I'm surprised, like, that more people aren't speaking up about some of like the egregious things that goes on in some of these states, like especially in New England, like, even Rhode Island. Some of the laws like are absolutely like absurd. Could you describe the motivations behind the Cheshire hunger strike and the main
Yes.
demands of the participants?
So, each one of the members of 860 has been impacted by incarceration in different manners. So, my father actually ended up serving 3.5 years. They were going to offer him accelerated rehabilitation for a different offense. After he, during an attempted robbery where they attempted to rob him and he defended himself, they were actually going to give him a diversionary program and dismiss the case without giving him a criminal record. And then they caught my dad with cannabis roaches. And those cannabis roaches, he ended up serving 3.5 years.
Wow.
They sentenced him in 1999. And I saw the different things that my father went through. So I make sure that when people reach out that we listen. There was a hunger strike last year while my husband was incarcerated. And I recognized one of the names from the hunger strike and I'm like, wow, I'm friends with this person. So I reach out to him and he tells me everything that's going on about the lack of mental health, how someone committed suicide, and they all asked to see mental health on the tier, and instead, correctional officers mocked them. So that hunger strike lasted for approximately 3 weeks, and there were promises made, but many of them weren't kept. The only positive outcome is that body cameras are going to be mandatory now with correctional officers, and those are going to start rolling out next year. Because correctional officers, they get away with a lot.
Right. For
Um,
sure.
you have some people that just show up, do their job, show respect, and just want to get this pension, and you have other guys who are so horrible.
For sure.
And the union fights really hard for these people. They're never held responsible. So then 2025 rolls around, the summer again. And a lot of these guys from the Cheshire hunger strike. Now, this is a different facility. Last year was at McDougal, but they transferred these guys around. And then I'm like, wow, there's a couple familiar names here from last year. So when I reach out to them, what they tell me is, listen, we still want access to mental health services. We want to be able to shower. We're having lockdowns all the time. And there's something called the Protect Act in Connecticut. The Protect Act means that they're supposed to have 5 hours a day out the cell. And instead, they were averaging maybe an hour and a half a day with these lockdowns. Lockdowns are less common in colder months, but correctional officers, if it's a nice day, it's the weekend, It's summertime. They're going to call out and go to the beach. And while most employers are going to hold their employees responsible, like, hey, you've called out way too many times, that's not something that happens when you're a correctional officer. You're not really held responsible. And they coordinate these call outs sometimes. They've locked down for holiday parties, which is egregious. Like, you're locking down to have a Christmas party. So these guys during summer months, they were getting maybe 45 minutes a day, an hour a day, an hour and a half a day, rather than the legally required 5 hours a day out the cell. And usually they break that up 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon or evening, which still really isn't enough. But they also wanted access to more programming. They wanted access to more rehabilitative um, programs. They wanted access to mental health care. Um, there's now pest control. They were asking for rats not to be in their food. So I guess now they have twice monthly pest control that now comes into the facility. So the ombudsman recently went into the facility at 3 a.m. and he's like, I didn't see rats. Looks like, the pest control is working. So I do have to thank the ombudsman for that. They've been doing partial lockdowns on Wednesdays now rather than full lockdowns, but it's still not where it needs to be. There's an overuse of solitary confinement, and they just want to be respected. They're like, oh, and the big thing, which actually shocked me, is that there's a significant amount of overdoses in the prisons. So fentanyl overdoses and K2. And they're like, we want correctional officers to stop bringing in drugs to the facility. And it kind of shocked me. And I'm like, you guys are on hunger strike because you want correctional officers to stop trafficking narcotics into the facility. And they're like, yeah, we're tired of getting locked down. We're tired of wondering if our cellmate's going to die. Um, and the correctional officers blame visitors for some reason. However, during the COVID lockdowns, when all visits were done via video, there were still overdoses happening.
Right.
And the only people who had access to these incarcerated people were the correctional officers. So, if simple math and, going by the amount of arrests by correctional officers, because correctional officers consistently are getting arrested in the state of Connecticut for narcotics trafficking. However, they're never convicted.
Right.
But these men who are serving, a decade and a half in prison, they were held accountable. They were convicted. So it's a different standard of justice.
For sure. And like I definitely see that. What role do grassroots organizations like BLM play in supporting movements such as the Cheshire hunger strike?
So besides the rallies, we've been spreading awareness. We've been contacting these men who are incarcerated to let them know that they're not alone. Even having that moral support, you don't have the access to consistent mental health care, but knowing that people care on the outside, I think helps them. Access to the media. Once the media starts covering things, lawmakers generally, that's how they find things out. Because if you listen just to DOC is going to tell you everything's fine. Um,
Right.
when hunger strikes and other forms of civil disobedience are publicized, at that point, lawmakers pay attention. In fact, there's a senator by the name of Saad Anwar. He's amazing. He's a pulmonologist here in Connecticut, but being a doctor, he's also worked with people in the mental health field. And he's actually been writing the commissioner of DOC to ask, he wants to spend 72 hours in solitary confinement in one of our prisons in Connecticut. And that's a very big deal when you have elected officials saying, hey, I want to see what these men go through.
Right.
You've had other elected officials who are saying, hey, we're going to propose legislation. Last year, one of the hunger strike demands was they no longer want to be served mystery meat.
Yeah.
So State Rep Chris Rosario actually was able to pass that law, and mystery meat has been banned as a form of punishment. But for some reason, DOC continues to serve it. So we're looking into certain things. And the other thing was the amount of strip searches. They'd like probable cause for strip searches.
Right.
So there's going to be a pilot coming into two of our facilities in Connecticut that house minors. That's our women's prison. So they house all women in Connecticut, York CI, and Manson Youth Institution. They're going to be instituting body scanners like what they have at the airport. And hopefully we can get that expanded, statewide into all our facilities, because some I believe it's about 70% of incarcerated people, somewhere around 40 to 70% of our incarcerated people also have a history of sexual abuse.
Oh, wow.
So if you are asking them to strip naked in front of a room full of people,
Right.
that tends to be kind of traumatizing. Eventually you do get used to it, but you shouldn't have to when now we have different forms of technology. And even correctional officers themselves admit that the body scanners would actually help reduce time away from the tier and possibly help resolve over or understaffing.
Yeah, it sounds really inhumane, like the way, like, these people are being treated. And I feel like, that it should definitely be more focused on rehabilitation. But I wanted to ask you, how do you see the challenges faced by incarcerated individuals in Cheshire relating to broader systemic issues of racial and social justice?
I think if how do I put this? Connecticut, I was shocked to find these stats out. So Connecticut has greater racial disparities in their incarceration rates than the South,
Wow.
which really shocked me.
Yeah.
Um, I believe that if more people came from our better funded suburbs, um, if prisons weren't majority black and brown, um, they would be more humane. And we can focus on, diversity when it comes to hiring, but we also need to think about the fact that we have people that come from underfunded areas, that come from underfunded schools. There's a lack of investment in our communities, and then afterwards, you're going to lock them up. And I think if kind of like with the opiate epidemic versus the crack epidemic.
Right.
So crack was, that's a black problem. We're just going to send them to jail.
For
And then
sure.
with the opiate epidemic, everyone, treatment. You're focusing on treatment and prevention
For sure.
because that was seen as more of a white issue. Incarceration is the same thing. It's seen as a black issue.
Yeah.
So who cares how they're treated? These people are super predators. They're criminals. They're scum according to certain people. So why are they going to focus on the humanity, the people who love them, or something as simple as their children? The governor wanted to cut prison messaging, and that's what people use to keep in touch with their families.
Most definitely. And that's horrible. Like, I know, like, that is so many injustices going on. What has been the response from local authorities or the Department of Correction to the hunger strike activism?
So local authorities have not responded, and Department of Correction, they have not responded. Lawmakers have responded. People on the outside have responded. However, last year they wanted to file an injunction to force feed the hunger strikers. This year they haven't done so after they saw the backlash of what happened last year. Um, this year as well, the hunger strike tripled in size. Last year they were able to kill it off pretty quickly after 3 weeks. Um, so there's that. But Department of Corrections they haven't released public statements. The first 2 days of the hunger strike, they even denied that it existed. So when media tried to contact them, they said, yeah, there's no hunger strike. So I got media in touch with some of the people on the hunger strike, and they're like, yeah, there's a hunger strike. Why is DOC denying it? I think DOC is hoping that this just goes away. And, maybe if they just stay quiet and they ignore it, that it'll go away. And the problem is it's not going away.
Right.
Um, it would be nice to get some sort of statement from the commissioner. But I know the commissioner right now, they just subpoenaed his text messages between him and the head of external affairs for another scandal. So I'm not really sure how much time he has to really respond.
Right. And I think that's one of the other issues that a lot of times, like, these people, like, they have their own corruption and, like, other issues. So it's like really hard to get justice. What strategies have you found effective in mobilizing community support and raising awareness about these causes?
So something that we've done is we've had to use a lot of social media. We've had to reach out to people who are in impacted communities. So the big five in Connecticut would be Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, New London, and Waterbury. Oh, and then there's New Britain as well.
Yeah.
And reaching out to people in those communities, flyers, um, rallying, like starting our rallies right after visits start. So that way we can catch people on the way out. And reaching out to the families of those who have been incarcerated. That's been a very big focus of ours. The closer you are to the problem or, impacted by the problem yourself, the more likely you are to care about it, unfortunately. Sometimes you're working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head and you want to care, but you can't. So by giving them different options to get involved, whether it's hey, here's a post on social media, please share this. If you want, tag the media. So we've had to be prepared as well whenever the media comes, and make sure that we have our talking points ready. Something that we did was we live streamed the conversation, and we had people who were part of the hunger strike on a phone call with our media, only for staff to then retaliate and write them tickets. So Cheshire CI staff were very quick to write these men tickets. They said that they jeopardized safety and security of the prison.
Wow, that's egregious. How do people outside the immediate community best support BLM grassroots Hartford and those involved in the Cheshire hunger strike?
So right now, part of our calls to action have been posting emails and phone numbers to OPM. OPM is Office of Policy Management. So they're responsible for a lot of the policy that goes on with our prison and carceral system. So them, as well as several other elected officials, we've posted phone numbers that they can call and emails. We've been really trying to get the word out and put that pressure on them, like, hey, these people are cared about and we're watching you guys. We don't care what they did to go in there. We are not a medieval society. We're supposed to be better than that, and we're supposed to be teaching these men, life skills so that when they come out, they don't come out angry and, ready to go back in. We want them to stay out and be productive members of society, especially because they come from communities that historically lack investment.
Right. Yeah. I definitely like, that resonates with me. I love the work you're doing. The last question, Evie, are there any upcoming campaigns or events that you would like to highlight for our audience?
Yes. So on Wednesday, we're going to be back at Cheshire CI on Wednesday, rallying at 6 p.m. The reason we chose 6 p.m. is because that's going to be right before their weekly lockdown. So Cheshire CI locks down every weekend, or not every weekend, every Wednesday. They were previously locking down every weekend until we started to rally. So it seems like all of a sudden the understaffing ended as soon as there was more attention on the facility. Crazy how that works. And on that's going to be on the 13th, Wednesday the 13th. And Wednesday the 20th, we're going to be in front of Department of Corrections because there are 13 facilities in Connecticut. You have Osborne CI that has not had clean drinking water in years and is leaching cancer-causing chemicals to the men in the facility, and there's no air conditioning. So you're in a big cement box right now, constant lockdowns, and you don't even get to leave your room while it's 94 degrees outside. Um, you have York CI where there's sexual assaults that occur and they're not really being investigated. It's the fox watching the hen house, so they investigate themselves.
Wow.
You have Garner CI, which is our state's mental health facility. And I believe yesterday they were in their cells for 24 hours due to understaffing. There's no mental health staff at McDougal CI during the weekends, and that's one of our more maximum security prisons. And I believe about 40% of our incarcerated population hasn't even been convicted.
Right. Yeah,
So, yeah, there's
that's
that.
wow. And like that's one of the things I think like, that is so flawed about our criminal justice system where people can be arrested and held in jail sometimes for years and like there's really not even evidence that they've done anything wrong like, and they don't really hurry up like to clear people's name. It would think like, that like, especially like when like some of the time like, it's very clear that like this person hasn't done anything wrong. There's no victim really and like they'll still like keep people in prison for years, and I think that's horrible.
Yeah, my friend chose to do 30 days in prison. So she's actually in York CI right now. So they didn't find cannabis in her vehicle. They actually said her vehicle smelled like cannabis, and this was 5 months prior to legalization in our state. So she tried to fight the case, and then finally she gave up. She took probation, and when I it was probation for a DUI despite not being intoxicated.
Right.
So there was no alcohol in her system. She blew 000. So since they couldn't charge her with possession, they gave her the DUI despite the lack of intoxication, only for her not to be able to afford the ignition interlock system that she needed. So her alternator was messed up. Her battery died. She would have had to pay another $75, which she didn't have. She's a working mother of three. And they offered her an extension on her probation. And she said, "How much is it to just make this probation go away? I can't do this anymore. I can't afford this." She doesn't have housing assistance. She doesn't qualify. She's what we call an Alice family. So asset limited, income constrained. She's just above what you need for food stamps or for housing. And they told her if you serve 30 days in prison, then we'll dismiss everything else. So she went in August 1st and she gets out September 1st, I believe, or August 31st. And she is having a really hard time right now being away from her daughters. She's never been away this long from them. But yeah, that's basically over the smell of cannabis.
Yeah, and it's an interesting fact, like 3.6 times more likely for a black person to be arrested for marijuana still, than a white person. And I think that is really egregious. And just like the hordes of black people who have gone to prison for marijuana in the past and aren't able to benefit financially, like with the legalization. I think like that is really absurd.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, in Connecticut, there's absolutely no justice or equity with our cannabis licensing. You have to team up with a rich white billionaire.
right.
So that's been the case in 100% of our joint equity venture dispensaries. So you've had to team up with a rich white millionaire or billionaire. Um, and instead, what they have right now is a cannabis task force. So the same day that teachers were arrested at the state capitol, protesting for more funding, I believe it was 9 teachers and 1 high school student that were arrested. They passed in the budget funds for a cannabis task force. So there's been raids. Um, Connecticut is they've reignited the war on drugs here in Connecticut. So they recently raided a vape shop only to come up empty-handed. So it's called Vapes R Us in New Haven, Connecticut. And yeah, so that's what they chose to spend their money on instead of education or busing, which is I believe Bridgeport, Connecticut now has one of the longest walking commutes for their students in the country. Instead of making our educational system a little bit more equitable, they have funded a cannabis task force to do raids. So, yeah.
I think with the cannabis, they try to disguise like the fact that they're trying to like protect children, like that these products like they appeal to children, but like do you feel that's just like a cover, like to hide the fact like they want to target minorities and put them in jail?
Yes, it's reefer madness all over again. So, they wanted to keep the children safe, just say no to drugs. You've got Mr. T with Nancy Reagan on his lap.
Right.
So that's it all over again. Our attorney general, who claims that he wanted to keep children safe, recently accepted an award on the taxpayer dime in Maryland um, for I forgot what the award was for, but it was from a prohibitionist organization. So we have people that own dispensaries, Republican lawmakers right now, or former Republican lawmakers that now hold licenses in dispensaries despite previously fighting legalization. So it's funny how that works.
Most definitely.
There's hmm?
What would you tell people like who want to make a difference, maybe not living in Connecticut, like what, but like see some of the injustices that are going on, like with they want prison reform, they want not to be harassed by the police in their neighborhoods, like what would you give the advice to like people who are watching this interview but like don't know where to start, like with activism?
Find like-minded people. Many organizations here in Connecticut started with one person. Power Up Connecticut is a good example. Began with one person protesting on the sidewalk with her daughter.
Wow.
And she was out there every day. And eventually she grew an organization. And I believe it was an average of 40 people a day afterwards that began to join her. When you find like minded people, organize your own events, you'll eventually attract other people who may be doing the same work or have the same passions as you. So you're going you're going to find a lot of roadblocks, barriers, people who are not going to believe in you. And instead of listening to them, just make a sign and go out there.
Most
And
definitely.
make sure to always also contact your elected officials over and over and over. Let other people know this is how you get in contact with them. Create infographics. You don't have to have a degree in graphic design, but give them, you know, small little blurb. These are the phone numbers I found. These are the phone numbers I call. And here's what I said.
It's Black August. I feel like, that it's so important to remember and reflect on the sacrifices of Black revolutionaries and political prisoners. Who are some of the revolutionaries or political prisoners that have inspired you personally?
Okay, so couple of the people who've inspired me, Walter S. Miller. In Hartford, Connecticut, I believe this was 1899. And this is a quote where he said, whenever a white man shows you his pistol, um, I want you to be able to show one on your hip right back.
Wow. Yeah, I'm feeling that. Thank you, Evie. I really appreciate you for taking the time and sharing your story, and it's so important. And I want you to come back, anytime, you're welcome, to update and what you're doing new. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You have a great day.
You too.